This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 338 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about the UEFA Champions League draw, Dortmund's 3-2 loss in the Supercup, the first Bundesliga defeat of the season, and we will preview Saturday's game in Freiburg, against Freiburg. I think it's a home match, and in the background you already hear my dog practicing on a squeaker toy, but for all that and more, joins me once again Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, I don't know. Is your dog killing Dortmund's title chances in the background?
Yeah, maybe that's sort of a metaphor. I don't know, but it'll stop shortly. I'm convinced. Also here, Lars Perlman. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
I'm currently annoyed my dog doesn't like squeaky toys, but I'm fine, thanks.
Why does your dog not like squeaky toys?
It's not really a dog. I mean, in its passport, it would say dog, but it's more of a human-cat hybrid, I think, with like some very little dog traits. So no barking, no squeaky toys, no liking getting pet. So it's not really a dog.
So, but if you open the door, she walks outside and then inside again, and then outside and then inside again, or?
Unlike you, Stefan, I don't have a luxurious house to my name. I live on the third floor, so if she walks out, that would be the balcony, and that's really small.
Well, we have another hint dropped of where Lars Perlman lives. So for everyone keeping track over the 300 episodes, soon you will know exactly where his location is. But anyway, let's talk about travel destinations. Borussia Dortmund drew Zenit St. Petersburg, Lazio and Club Brugge in the Champions League draw. Lars, your initial reaction to that Group F?
F's in chat for the three other teams, because Dortmund should cleanly sweep through that group. I think this was pretty much one of the two or three best case scenarios, I would say, with all due respect, yada, yada, yada. But I mean, Zenit were arguably alongside Porto the easiest draw from pot 1. There were a couple of sides from pot 3, even 2 from Italy that I would like to avoid in Inter and Atalanta. Both of that happened. And in pot 4, I think all the teams in there didn't really look too daunting for a club of Dortmund size. So for once, this should be relatively smooth sailing on paper. Now, obviously, we know games aren't played on paper, but if I were to pinpoint it now, I would say like 13 points and first position should pretty much be the aim. So, a defeat here, one defeat, one draw, I think that looks about right. And, just from two other aspects, I think travel-wise, it's okay. St. Petersburg is obviously quite far away, but there were worse draws even then, in Ukraine. Rome and Bruges, pretty close by. I think Rome is the only non-risk area in terms of COVID right now for, the German authorities, but I think pretty much everywhere, every group would have been a problem in that regard, and I'm sure UEFA have some sort of solution for that. And one last thing, I think this would have been a really great group for traveling away fans, because they've not been to St. Petersburg in a while. They've never been to Rome with Dortmund, if I'm not mistaken, or at least not in the last few years. And Bruges is obviously also a very nice city. So 3 great trips, which unfortunately aren't going to happen.
Yeah, I can only recommend Bruges. I was there once and I absolutely loved it. And obviously, if you can make it, just watch In Bruges. It's a great movie. Matthias, do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, initially you look at this and you would think of the 3 other teams, Lazio would probably be the most difficult one, but I yesterday had the privilege of watching them getting destroyed by Atalanta. And I completely concur with Lars in the sense of Lazio or Inter or Atalanta. I'll take Lazio. Thank you very much.
All right, fair enough. Then I guess it's time already to move on let's start with the Supercup and then handle the Bundesliga later. Borussia Dortmund with a 3-2 defeat, late goal by Joshua Kimmich yet again to decide the tie. I gotta say, it was kind of interesting to see Dortmund give up easy goals and then somehow make their way back into the game. And I thought they actually had a couple of good chances to win it. And I thought overall, if you just go by chances, they probably had the multitude of better scoring opportunities. So in that regards, maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity not to lift the trophy in the end. But Matthias, other than what I just said, what did you make of this game and the lineup?
Well, I mean, I thought when you looked at the initial lineup, especially when you look at the double pivot, it was kind of clear that Favre is treating this as friendly, with more important matches coming up, and especially following. I think if Dortmund would have beaten Augsburg, maybe it would have been a stronger initial lineup and less experimentation also later with subs. But he just clearly just didn't care about this match. And taking Holland off when he did signified everything you need to know about Favre thinking this not important. I know ESPN FC had a field day in their football daily or whatever it is, tearing into Favre about taking Holland off. But, you also can't forget those are English pundits that think something like a community shield is actually really important. I personally just don't care about this game, never have. Wouldn't miss it if it went away. It's whatever. And given the lack of depth Dortmund has at striker, which again became painfully obvious in this match, taking Holland off at that point after he'd really worked hard and a lot, I think was the right choice. I agree with you that when Dortmund gave up two, I would say, naive goals, I was like, oh, good God, this is going to be, they're just going to get rolled over at this point, but they really found their nerve. Unfortunately, Thomas Meunier lost his nerve in a critical moment. And Manuel Neuer showed once again why he is still the best German keeper out there. And maybe with Alisson in a shout for best one or two keepers in the world again. But I thought it was a good sign from Dortmund, but you also saw Flick then rotating, bringing in some youngsters and stuff like that. It was kind of, at one point they're like, we got bigger and better things to deal with, especially both teams coming off of, unpredictable losses in the Bundesliga, needing to kind of, solidify things. I mean, I know now people are saying Bayern won 5 titles, or trophies or whatever you want to say this year, and they could win 6 if the Club World Cup takes place. But, it's just not a high importance match. But it was nice to see that Dortmund showed some character in a situation where in past they could have fallen apart pretty easily. Oh, and one side note, Manuel Akanji has done really well so far this season. So, moving on.
All right. Lars, what are your takeaways from this game, if any?
Yeah, if I had any, I think Matthias pretty much covered them. I think this is, both teams treated the game as it is, which is a glorified preseason friendly that this season wasn't played preseason because, Bayern had other commitments. I'm not sure why this game had to take place, but also I am sure because there's like TV rights and contracts and whatever, but I always think if a team wins the German double, there kind of is no point to the Supercup. I mean, Dortmund weren't even in the cup final this season. They just came in second in the league. I don't know how that makes them contenders for the Supercup, which was intended to be the game between the cup holders and the league champions. But I mean, obviously this is modern football and more big games with big teams means more money. So that's why they play it. But I'm kind of glad that both teams treated like I would treat it, as I said, like a preseason game, testing ground for a couple of players. I think all the decisions Favre made in terms of personnel made sense, including taking off Haaland. I mean, he worked so hard, as Matthias pointed out. He was sprinting a lot. He's the only actual striker in the squad, although, Reinier and Hazard can play the position. And I think against most opposition, they can do a relatively decent job going forward. But you still want to conserve Haaland as much as possible. And I think we've heard like Zorc and Kehl and maybe even Favre in the past talk about how they sometimes need to rein in Haaland because he's so young and exuberant and wants to win so much that he kind of doesn't take care of his body enough. And he's only 20 years old. He's not had a lot of experience at the highest level. So we really want to conserve his strength for, what is going to be a pretty grueling season after this next international break. I mean, the Champions League group stage takes place over 2 months. There's basically a midweek fixture every week for Dortmund until they drop out of a cup competition. So there's no winter break this season. So I mean, I'm very much okay with basically throwing the Supercup, if you like, if it helps keeping important players healthy for the rest of the season. And also, I mean, Reinier probably is right now Haaland's backup, and if you can't put him on 20 minutes in a relatively or totally unimportant game, then you have bigger issues than Favre taking off Haaland or subbing out the win or whatever pundits and fans alike might have been saying about him.
Yeah, I 100% agree. As much as a win might have been enjoyable, I think you need to really look at the bigger picture. But it's interesting to see that I think Haaland has made a little bit of progress in his older play. I thought it was pretty positive and really helped Dortmund to create some possession moments, which is important against Bayern, and allows you to lose the ball then higher up the field and then also regain possession higher up the field, if you will. And I think most of Dortmund's chances really were created of a turnover in Bayern's half or around the middle circles. So I think overall that was very positive, especially that Dortmund pressed Bayern a little bit here and there, because we know that this team under Lucien Favre is not the high octane Vollgas Fußball or whatever pressing team that it used to be. So making things a little uncomfortable here for Bayern is not too bad, especially that you want to tire out players like, say, Joshua Kimmich and such in the long term. So, there were a couple positive moments. Obviously, Thomas Meunier needs to somehow prevent that counter attack a little better. And Felix Passlack, obviously a bit unfortunate there against Thomas Müller for the 2-0. But whatever. I mean, the Thomas Delaney giveaway really was kind of silly, but these things sort of happen, and especially after the game has lost all its rhythm after like 5 substitutions were made and whatnot. So unfortunate, but there we are. I mean, even Nico Schulz got a run out, which wasn't too shabby either. But you can also see that this team did not really click and gel, and there were not much automatism once Haaland went off and you had Reina and Reinier and Bellingham on the field. It was also a bit messy, and Dortmund's ball retention sort of dropped, and with that the chances to win this game were basically zero. So maybe in penalties, maybe not make this mistake and hold on to the 2-2 draw, but that's all water under the bridge now. So I guess it's time to move on and talk about the game that really counts, Matthias. That was the 2-0 loss against Augsburg, and I would say a pretty painful one because it sort of feels unnecessary. And, if before the season everyone talks about things Dortmund need to do better, they pretty much look at the Augsburg away game as like the typical game where you do not want to drop points, and, this is sort of the Pflichtsieg. As we call it in German, where you want to gain all 3 points, but obviously that did not occur. I think expected goals wise, Augsburg had 1.0 and Dortmund 1.7, according to FBref or StatsBomb. So but in the end it was a 2-0. So what are your thoughts on that game?
It had to be Daniel Caligiuri, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can we just agree? I called that he would be involved. When the free kick and happened, I'm like, okay, that's the one I spotted them. That's kind of what I expected to happen with him in there. And oh my God, Schalke could use him right now. Well, let's just put that there. But what frustrated me about this match is almost like they didn't watch the previous week against Union. Now, obviously, Augsburg played a little bit different against Dortmund than Union Berlin, but not significantly different in the sense that against Union Berlin, they also ceded possession to Union Berlin. The difference is Union Berlin really didn't know what to do about it and defended really, really poorly, but created more chances by also stretching the field, because that's what Union does. Union doesn't know how to play intricate passes centrally. That's not their game. They stretch the field, they put in crosses and created chances against Augsburg. Dortmund somehow completely refused to adjust their game plan in any way. And the frustrating thing was over and over and over again to see these attacks kind of run into the middle without any possibility of stretching or trying to stretch Augsburg in any shape or form. And you're just not going to get through a block of 10 players. Because at one point, Steven Cherundolo said, why doesn't Dortmund just go to a back four? Because they're not really defending against a striker. At most one. That changed in the second half. Augsburg played a little bit more aggressively with two strikers, a little bit higher up the pitch. But in the first half, he was absolutely right. You could have just released Emre Can to move further forward to create some more havoc and stretch the field a little bit and allow your central players to go wider, because there's another body centrally to create that or create underlaps and overlaps. But somehow there was just no interest in doing that. And that was, for me, the frustrating thing to watch, is that there just didn't seem to be a plan B in any shape or form. And that was really, really frustrating.
Yeah, I totally agree. Dortmund in this game, I think, had 25 crosses and they weren't all that successful, to be honest. I think Meunier alone had 8 crosses, and I think that the key number, though, isn't maybe the cross number isn't indicated, but I think the key number is 22 switches of play. I think Dortmund could have done much better and should have done much better, because before we talk about Dortmund sort of clogging up the middle and Augsburg doing the same and then not finding a way through, and it's just that they need to move the ball much faster, and I think that's something that sort of probably comes by itself automatically with time as they gain more match rhythm and stuff like that. But for the time being, that was kind of frustrating to see players always step on the ball and really take the pace out of the game, and not switching it from left to right often enough. I thought that was a mistake. Obviously, a switch of play isn't always that easy to achieve, but I still think that you need to move Augsburg much faster to open up some gaps, because the way Dortmund played, it was just way too slow, and it wasn't like Augsburg was completely 100% solid. There were gaps here and there where Dortmund could have played in. I think there was a chance very early in the beginning where Dortmund had a 1-2 and almost took advantage of it. But obviously the finishing on Dortmund's side wasn't ideal either. But yeah, I just think you need to play much, much quicker. Lars, is there anything you want to criticize specifically that Dortmund definitely need to do better, maybe also structurally?
I'm not sure about, structure and even tactics and all that. I think this was more of a relatively simple case of Dortmund being really good, I think, for like 25 minutes or so, and then taking almost the time to get some sort of breather, I thought, letting Augsburg in a little bit. And then, honestly, I think this is one of those weird games where one incident or situation kind of changed the whole perspective of the game, if you like. And that's the foul of Michael Gregoritsch on, I don't even remember who it was from Dortmund. There was one incident when suddenly the the few thousand fans that were there in Augsburg Stadium came alive, after Dortmund had kind of lulled them in to a sort of slumber, and Dortmund reacted kind of poorly, I thought, to that situation. And then there were like 4 or 5 minutes with a lot of fouls, a lot of aggression on the pitch. The situation where Haaland was very lightly slapped across the face by Jeffrey, whatever his name is. Haulau, whatever, doesn't really matter. And suddenly Augsburg were in the game, and then obviously Emre Can gave away that stupid free kick needlessly. I mean, you don't have to have your elbow in your opponent's face in that situation. I think that was easily avoidable in some regards. And I mean, obviously you can always concede from in swinging cross. That's part of the game. That's how relatively poor sides such as Augsburg, how they survive in the Bundesliga for 10 seasons. Obviously, I would argue, or you can argue, that Roman Bürki needs to claim that. I mean, we can have a discussion about that. I can also understand why he didn't come out, because that's a collision waiting to happen, and it's Augsburg away first half. Do you really need to risk your bones? I'm not sure. But certainly the game completely changed in those few instances, and Dortmund weren't able to recover. Also because I thought Augsburg were really good in the second half and generally deserved the win, basically. I mean, you mentioned expected goals numbers. This is one of those games where that can be a bit deceiving, because Dortmund really didn't have that too many, opportunities where you would say, man, he should have scored that. It was more of, decent half chances that accumulated because they had obviously so much of the ball. I think in the second half it was like 86%, I think they said on German TV. So I didn't really feel at any point though during the game that that's something that we've kind of had a number of times over the last few months and years, especially away to teams that Dortmund should, theoretically beat handily. I didn't feel at any point really that a comeback was coming and was close. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but at no point was I thinking, one goal and it's completely on for Dortmund. That just didn't happen. And that's, I guess, credit to Augsburg's defending, but also speaks some volumes of, Dortmund's inability to sometimes turn it up, those important notches in these kind of games. And if we want to make more sweeping judgments, it's kind of, a bit of a characterization of Dortmund's almost staleness in like their general development as a team. I mean, I don't want to go too deep with this, but like this is kind of what we come to expect from Dortmund. And, there's very little to suggest to me that this won't happen again, in, I don't know when they play Bielefeld away from home. But, that's the kind of game where that can happen again, I feel, because that's just how Dortmund operate and who they are at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's talk briefly about Roman Bürki, because I think he could have come off his line in for both goals. I thought when Caligiuri scored, he was nowhere near closing down that angle, and I thought he needed to be off the line quicker, especially since it was a counterattack. That felt kind of weird, but for that set piece, I also think he should have come off. Matthias, your final judgment on that Bürki situation or decision making?
Yeah, I think he could have been a little bit more aggressive in those situations. But at the same time, that's not necessarily his game. When he does become more aggressive, it tends to not end well. But I guess in these situations, it didn't end well regardless. So, hey, what does that matter? To me, the bigger issue isn't necessarily Bürki, is that those situations even arose in the first place. That's to me, the bigger problem. Like Lars said, Emre Can, that foul was pointless at that position in the field. Augsburg's not going to do anything. And the counterattack was also a little bit naive to have that situation arise. Granted, Dortmund's pushing forward. It's more likely to happen, but you can't really let that happen. So then you put your keeper in that type of position where, even though I'm a fan of Bürki and I do defend him, he's not Manuel Neuer. Let's put it that way. I know, big newsflash there. I saw it on Twitter. People were blaming Bürki for those goals, and it's like, nah, that's a little too simple scapegoatish for me. But he could have done better, no doubt. But again, everybody in the team could have done better on that day, on the pitch and on the bench. I mean, I'll be honest. For me, one of the big takeaways was this was the kind of match where you definitely saw Gio Reyna and Jude Bellingham, their age, that they're kids and they played like kids. It was a match where I would have preferred to see Brandt and Reus come on for those two players in a significantly earlier time frame, maybe at the half. But Favre seems very enamored with Gio Reyna, even when Gio Reyna is not playing well. And in matches like against Gladbach, which is more a type of match that plays into Favre's strengths and makes players like Bellingham and Reyna shine, that's great. But in a match like this, the more experienced player, I believe, is your better option.
Yeah, maybe. Lars, do I remember correctly that both Jadon Sancho and Gio Reyna ended the game on as wingbacks?
Kind of, but that wasn't really representative of anything other than Favre trying to throw men forward. I definitely agree on Reyna with Matthias. He didn't have a great evening or afternoon, I should say. And also,
can we talk about the diving?
Just want to quickly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna go to. I mean, people on Twitter didn't really like me pointing out that Gio Reyna at this point is a bit of a diver. I mean, I already wouldn't have given the penalty against Gladbach because of his trying to win it so hard. I mean, obviously there was contact, and I guess by a letter of the law you can do it, but I mean, that didn't sit right with me, and certainly I think he should have been carded for the one against Augsburg, even though again there was very minor contact, but in a completely different part of the pitch almost. I mean, he already had thrown himself to the ground, so I think he really needs to be careful not to become the boy who cried wolf. I mean, obviously now that there's VAR, hooray, that, you won't get, referees just not giving you penalties because they don't like you, because obviously everybody can check it again and refs will be held accountable almost. But, there's also fouls outside of the penalty area, and there's decisions to be made on, bookings versus no bookings, or bookings versus red cards. And I can guarantee you that referees talk about this stuff and watch this stuff. And right now, or maybe not just yet, but if he continues on his path, there's certainly going to be a couple of moments here and there where Reyna's reputation comes into his detriment. So it's something that I would like to see addressed by coaching staff or, senior management or even other players, because, that's not something that I think anyone wants Dortmund to stand for. And he's also too talented to resort to these tactics on the regular. I mean, pretty much every attacking player has probably dived in his day. And I remember Marco Reus definitely had some tendencies to that extent in his early days at Gladbach and also at Dortmund, and he's reined it in, and I'm sure and I hope that Reyna is also gonna tone it down a bit.
Yeah, can he rein it in? Anyway, Matthias, that was obviously an unnecessary loss, I would say. Kind of annoying. Is it positive though that Bayern Munich got smashed 4-1 the next day, or does it make the drop points for Dortmund even more aggravating?
No, I mean, I see people saying that, well, because Bayern lost, that makes Dortmund's loss worse. No, I mean, that's a little, that's like BVB Twitter fatalism at its worst that I've really bemoaned for the last 2 years. Why sometimes after matches, I just can't I can't deal with that fandom on Twitter because I just think it's toxic and pointless. I told my wife, it's like just that moment. It's almost that scene from The Godfather where he's like, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. So it's like every time you think you're out of the title race, Bayern are now pulling you back in through that. But again, it's so early in the season. People that went out say, "Oh, congratulations, Bayern, on the title win." Bayern made them, and Hoffenheim made them look really stupid the next day. Hey, did you know that the Hoffenheim coach used to coach Bayern's reserves? I don't know if anybody ever mentioned that. But it is what it is. It's early in the season. I didn't expect Bayern to lose, and I sure didn't expect them to lose quite like that. But, the one thing, I can't remember who spoke of it, if it was during broadcast. I think it was during the Supercup broadcast where it was brought up that given the nature of Hansi Flick's tactics, that tiredness will come into play, and the amount of matches that Bayern have to play every season and their players have to play, this kind of, these results will occasionally pop up this season. But they won't be that often. It would be nice if it would pop up when Dortmund play against Bayern. That would be the best scenario.
Yeah, I think Bayern are a bit more vulnerable this season than usually. The only problem for Dortmund is that they probably will also take the L at Hoffenheim away. So, can't really count your chickens there. But, Dortmund will probably have similar issues regarding tiredness, but not as bad as Bayern will. So, that's for sure. Lars, should we move on to the Freiburg game, which is on Saturday? And Freiburg have done not too shabbily so far. So what can Dortmund expect for this game? And do you think that will look a bit different than the Augsburg game?
I mean, this is kind of, Freiburg, I think, have won once at Dortmund in their entire history, and that was in October of 2001. Sebastian Kehl was playing, but for Freiburg, and scored. So, I think we probably mention it every time Dortmund play against Freiburg because it's such a remarkable set in a way that their one win is older than a few of our listeners, I'm sure. So this fixture hasn't been kind on Freiburg for obvious reasons in that regard. But I think Freiburg are definitely a side to be reckoned with this season. I think they actually improved on the transfer market, even though they lost 3 regular starters in goalkeeper Alexander Schwolo, defender Robin Koch. His name is not Koch. For our English commentators and listeners, he plays for Leeds.
It's very
now.
hard for English speakers to make the
No,
sound.
It's not, because they know of lochs in Scotland. So if you can say that, and other than that, just say Koch or Cock or whatever, but don't say cock. And they also lost Luka Waldschmidt to Benfica, but I think they've done really well in replacing those guys. One of the tactics darlings, if you like, Baptiste Santamaria, just a great name also in central midfield, had a decent debut for them against Wolfsburg on Sunday, I believe. And just generally speaking, I think Freiburg is one of those sides that you can always watch as a neutral and be decently entertained. If a Freiburg game is on and you don't have skin in the game, you can just enjoy usually the performances, at least of Christian Streichsmann. Obviously, he's one of the greatest characters in the Bundesliga and the longest serving head coach in the Bundesliga. So I think there's always something when Freiburg are involved, but also Dortmund usually have the better end on their side, and there's really no excuse for them not winning such a game at home, especially after already having dropped points against Augsburg. So while I'm talking up Freiburg, everything other than a home win for Dortmund would be a bit of a sensation almost.
Yeah, I know, especially since Dortmund had a midweek game to gel, to test, to improve, which I think at this stage of the season can actually be a little bit more helpful. I don't think the players are too tired yet, So I'll take that Super Cup maybe as a plus for the short term at least. Freiburg are in 5th place right now, and I think their top scorer is Niels Pedersen again with 2 goals to his name. They just had a 1-1 draw against Wolfsburg, I think, where they conceded pretty late in the game. Matthias, what changes do you expect from the Super Cup lineup or from the Augsburg lineup, respectively? Do you think that Favre will mix it up a little and change from the team that started against Gladbach and pretty much against Augsburg?
Well, I personally would. I mean, I don't expect Hoot Delaney to be the central pivot. Start there. I would like to see Reus and Brandt in the starting lineup because I think they did it very well against Bayern. This is also one of those matches where I think experience supersedes youthful exuberance, especially because, Freiburg with Christian Streich, as Lars pointed out, great character, great coach. Freiburg in general have had 2 of the most notable Bundesliga coaches in Christian Streich and Volker Finke over the last 25 years. And Streich somehow always gets a team of quote unquote nobodies to be somebody and play really, really well. And I think they will play well against Dortmund and create chances, but ultimately they always tend to somehow cock it up. To say, I mean, we got to add the E right now to the podcast anyway, because Lars said cock about 20 times, referring to Robin Koch. So, and I agree with him. You can say the ch, but I expect that to be a major lineup change. I would hope to see it. And obviously, Axel Witsel will be back in. And other than that, Guerrero will probably play at the left wing-back position with Paslak sitting on the bench. That would kind of be my assumption for this match.
Lars, what are your thoughts? Maybe Paslak on for Meunier was something out of the ordinary, maybe?
I'm not necessarily expecting it also because after the game you have the international break. So, you don't really need to take into account another fixture next week. So mild rotation, mostly rotation back or whatever, however one would describe that. So I agree with Guerrero coming back in, presumably Witsel, even though I kind of would like to see Delaney start over him at this point. Despite Delaney's mistake against Bayern, I think he added more than Witsel has done over the last few games. And I'm kind of expecting Piszczek to start just so he can get some minutes again. Obviously, he doesn't play for Poland anymore, so would be nice to get him another run out. So I could see him play for Emre Can in defense. Can really hasn't impressed me much over the last few games. Don't think Piszczek against Freiburg would play right wing back, but stranger things have happened. I think Meunier, having come back from an injury in preseason, has played a lot over the last few games, so might make sense to put Piszczek there. But also Paslak kind of deserves to keep playing, other than his height difference against Thomas Müller. I don't know that even with perfect timing he could have done anything about that second goal for Bayern. So mild rotation, don't expect anything crazy. Would definitely like to see Reus, but caution is always best with him. And since Favre can still make 5 changes this season, makes sense to bring Reus along quite slowly, especially in these weeks with multiple fixtures. And also Reus is probably going to feature for Germany a bit, so he gets more minutes there. Don't have to rush him back for a Freiburg game just to get his legs running. So don't expect anything crazy. I think if the game permits it, I think Favre would probably like to give Renier another decent run out just because he needs the minutes. You can definitely see that he has some catching up to do, especially also in terms of tactics. So that's always best to do in a game state. But even though Freiburg usually are what we call Punktelieferant in German, so they always deliver the points for Dortmund. In Dortmund, I think it's unlikely that this is going to be a game that's completely out of hand for Freiburg with like 40 minutes to play. So I don't know how much experimentation Favre will be able to get to.
Yeah, obviously you can never rule it out that Dortmund absolutely shellacked Freiburg in like the first 50, 60 minutes or so, but I would agree with that assessment. I feel like it's going to be a very close game that Dortmund may decide very late. So, we can actually just jump to prediction, and I think Dortmund might win this one 3-1. Matthias, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you, Stefan. 3-1.
Lars?
Yeah, we're 3 people with one opinion because I'm also gonna say 3-1.
All right, so that almost wraps it up. However, I don't know if it's appropriate to dole out Schadenfreude when you yourself come off 2 L's. However, I think we need to talk about it a little bit, just briefly. Lars, what are your thoughts on Manuel Baum, who has replaced Dave Wagner now that Schalke have 2 losses against Bayern and Bremen? What was the final score? I think 4-1 or so against Bremen. So they're dead last right now, but still, I don't know if I expected them to fire their coach right away. So what do you make of that replacement and the assistant coach of Naldo?
Well, first of all, I'm still kind of flabbergasted that they went into the season with Wagner, because everybody and their mothers were able to see that was not going to work out. I mean, I think you didn't get much money for betting on Wagner as the first fired head coach, but I certainly did in terms of, kick tip and whatever. So prediction games, I don't condone sports betting. Anyway, Manuel Baum, seems about right that they don't attract a bigger name than that. For a brief second on Sunday, when Ralf Rangnick in German TV basically threw himself at Schalke, I thought, maybe they do pull this off, because obviously Rangnick is arguably one of the 2 or 3 most influential head coaches in recent Bundesliga history. So getting him at Schalke would have been a tremendous coup in one sense, but also quite difficult in terms of, the politics, because I don't think he would have worked under Jochen Schneider as the head of sporting whatever at Schalke, and Michael Reschke as the squad planner. So a big name was always going to be difficult to attract for Schalke, also given like the dire straits their squad are in. So yeah, Baum, definitely a good tactician. I don't know if he can get his points across. I think that was kind of the issue at Augsburg, but still he kept them up just as well as Markus Weinzierl. And looking back at it, I think Weinzierl didn't do as badly at Schalke as it seemed at the time, because he obviously only lasted 1 season, and I think they finished like 6th or 7th. What they would give to finish 6th or 7th now. And the Naldo thing, that just seems kind of like a populist move. He doesn't have any coaching badges that I'm aware of, and I'm always a bit annoyed when former players get like a break in that regard, and people who really work hard at the craft of coaching don't get that kind of chance. But obviously he's a big name. Schalke fans really like him. He has all the experience at the top club that Baum doesn't have, so it might make some sense in that regard. And also, I mean, are we ruling out that Naldo is going to suit up for the Dortmund game and score a header? I'm not.
Yeah, don't jinx anything. It's kind of an odd one, but it's also not new for Manuel Baum, because if I remember correctly, his assistant coach at Augsburg was Jens Lehmann at one point. So, an interesting one. Matthias, your final thoughts before we get out of here?
Well, I mean, you remember last week you talked about, Mark Wilmots or somebody like that being such a Schalke hire. Well, Naldo is the Schalke hire in that sense, where I saw that and I kind of laughed. I'm like, it's Schalke. Rangnick I never really took seriously. It would have been his third time at the club. Manuel Baum, I agree, is actually a very intelligent, highly qualified coach, understands tactics. I actually have a few of his books and DVDs on coaching. So he knows what he's talking about. I laughed a little bit when I saw, Schalke Twitter freak out and say, oh, Manuel Baum, why didn't we get someone with higher reputation? It's like, you do realize where you sit right now in the world, right? Like, Manuel Baum is probably the best you can get, and he may be even selling himself short since he picked them to finish 15th on Sky at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, but in his defense, he picked Schalke finishing 15th with David Wagner at the helm. So,
well, I'm sure if he would have known, well, it's my Schalke, we'll finish 13th.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's the spirit. Anyway, I think that wraps things up for now. It wasn't the best week, so I really hope before the international break, Dortmund can finish on the positive. So the ensuing 2 weeks will be lived on better vibes. Anyway, Lars. Before I completely botched things here, how can people follow you on Twitter?
They can't at the moment because I've gone private.
Well, that's too bad. Anyway, then I guess we'll move on and leave Lars being in his privacy. Matthias?
So how do you go private on Twitter? I need to find that out. You can find me on Twitter at Matthiasuk.
Well, I know how to go private on Twitter, but I won't tell Matthias. And you can follow me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter, and all of us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to subscribe to the show, please check out our YouTube channel or iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And if you want to read our written content, then go to theyellowwall.net, become a patron for $1 a month, or sponsor an episode for $10 a shout, and get a shout out for the episode. And that's pretty much it. So really hoping and keeping my fingers crossed that the next game will be a little bit more successful, and we will be back next week with the analysis of the Freiburg game. And until then, goodbye and good luck.